We are all on, and I believe that this is a live event, so we have other participants as well. They are joining us live. Um, so I just wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Private Home Care's speaker series. Our guest speaker today is Naomi Feil, and we are honored to have her here with us today. Naomi is a legend in this space. She will discuss, among other things, validation therapy. This is a method developed by Naomi herself in the early 70s for approaching individuals with Alzheimer's and other dementias. Since that time, she has published numerous books, led seminars around the world, and I personally learned about validation therapy from Joey in our St. Louis office. And I have to say, Naomi's research and approach is just extremely relevant to the work that we do. And frankly, everyone needs to be aware of this method. And again, thank you so much. We are just honored to have you here. And thank you for accepting our invitation. And Joey from our St. Louis office will say a few words and we can get started.
Well, thanks, Mario, and everybody. I'll just tell you a little story. I think about 3 or 4 years ago, I had the honor and the privilege to participate in an all-day workshop with Naomi Feil, and I was just blown away with the validation method and how. And I was explaining to the group before we got on to the call, how simple it can be, but yet there's a lot of, moving parts when dealing with folks with dementia. And Ms. Feil was just able to simplify her method in a way where it's just, I'm able to use it on a day-to-day basis when I'm talking with people, with clients, family members. And it's the ability to, articulate things and have conversations with people that you normally may not have thought you could have. And I know that Naomi has lots of examples. The Gladys example, which was amazing. I got to see that video. I believe Gladys Wilson. And I'm privileged and honored to be able to share Miss Naomi Feil with our group. So thank you so much. Appreciate it. And this is a thrill for me.
Thank you. That's wonderful. I am honored that you are honoring me. It makes me feel good at my old years, that when I die, part of me will still be there because of people like you. And I do appreciate that very much.
And like I said before, you look amazing. I'm not going to reveal how old you are because you're not supposed to do that, but
you can do that. I'll be 89, I think, in July. Right, Vicki?
Yep, that's right.
That's how old I am. 89. Think I'll reach 100.
Do you want to?
I don't know. I was hoping that Ed would reach 100. My husband, Ed is my husband. He was 96, I think, when he died.
Yeah. Do you want to live to 100?
Do I what? Do you learn?
Do you want to live?
I want to live to 100. I think it depends. If I lose more memory, I think I will accept that. Like if I don't recognize you anymore when you come in the room, I will not feel horrible because I know that this happens. So validation has helped me a lot now, because things that would have shaken me up if I don't recognize my own daughter before, they don't shake me up anymore because people do that. And that's normal for a person my age with my memory loss. And that you didn't have white hair as I remember you were a little girl and you had brown hair And you didn't wear glasses either. And that's how I remember you. So now you're a white-haired young woman with glasses. So what was your name again?
Right.
Okay.
And of course, for people who don't know what validation is, the appropriate response to that would not be to say, I'm Vicky, I'm your daughter. The validating response would be, who do I remind you of? And that gives her the freedom to either look more carefully and say, oh, you must be Vicky, or I don't know. Oh, I'm unfamiliar. Is that okay, or is that scary? I could ask. And so I'm exploring her reality rather than taking my reality and placing it on her.
And also,
I-
I feel bad if you said, don't you know, Mom, I'm your daughter, I'm Vicky. That would make me feel terrible.
Right.
And I'd probably lose more brain cells and more cortisol goes up to the hippocampus. And next time I'll be even worse.
Right.
The cortisol is where memory is. So now I've lost more.
And also, if I'm confronting you with reality, that can create a lot of anger. A lot of people respond to that with anger. Don't you tell me what to do or who you are. I know what's what. So as a caregiver, it's super important to be aware that what we say, how we say it, with what tone of voice, how close we get, how far away we get, all makes a huge difference. I don't know if everybody on this webinar knows what validation is. Do you want to say something quickly, Mom, about that?
Vicky, you go ahead.
I go ahead. Well, when I'm teaching, my one sentence description is validation is a method of building connection, building relationships, and enhancing communication between older adults living with cognitive decline and their caregivers, whether those caregivers or carers are professional or family or friends.
I'm glad you used the word suffer, Vicky. I don't know, somehow, I think a 50-year-old seeing her 90-year-old lose memory, the 50-year-old suffers. But the 90-year-old says it's better to be crazy because then it doesn't matter what you do. Ah. So the younger person is suffering, not the older person, and they're projecting, which I think is bad.
Well, one of the things that we hope to do with this interview webinar is to show things that can relatively easily be changed by all caregivers, whether they work in facilities, or, sorry, I know that's a verboten word, communities, neighborhoods, fill in the blank, or home care, or just relatives. It doesn't take a lot. It just takes will and heart. We got a couple of questions talking about your experience with home care, because I wanted to ask you to talk about how you experienced home care in your own life, because you set it up for Ed.
Well, I think it depends on the caregiver. If the caregiver has learned validation, or if intuitively the caregiver wants to foster independence on Ed, my husband, then they wouldn't say, now it's time for your breakfast. They would try, they would try to elicit from him, like, do I remind you of your sister? If the old person, if my husband would call the caregiver by his sister's name, do I look like your sister? Did you fight with her when you were little? What was she like? Did she get married? Did you meet her husband, and so on? So I would explore rather than say, I'm not your sister, and so on.
Right.
I would use that as an opportunity to get to know the person better. And curiosity, I think, is a wonderful attribute, whatever you want to call it. To be curious, what is this old man's background like? What kind of a relationship did he have? Just wanting to know more about human beings, just curiosity that we have about each other.
So for you, having home care was the right choice.
Yes, because I think most of the people have heard of validation. So I think
and you set it up in a very easy way for him and for yourself, for the most part. There were some downsides too, I remember.
What were they, Vicki?
Well, it took a long while for you to get used to having strangers in the house.
Right.
That was a hard thing. And it took a while for people to learn to ask, don't tell, and to put aside their need to help
Mm-hmm.
in order to wait until the person asks. Am I clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think those were hard because
To walk now, to go into the kitchen, and if I'm afraid I'm going to spill the coffee because I'm not so steady, then it's very kind of the caregiver without making a big deal. Do you want to get the coffee? Are you ready for your coffee or something? Knowing the embarrassment that I might suffer if I fell on the way, God forbid,
Right. So it took a while in the beginning, but there was a rhythm and people learned and you taught.
They were respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in your long experience, you've been in a lot of long-term care communities.
You mean I've had experience, is that what you're saying?
Not living there, but working there.
I lived in a long-term care facility, Vicki.
Oh, tell about that. Tell.
Yeah, my parents were directors of a home for the aged. And we had 5 rooms in this home. And for me, I felt very important because at that time there was a siren. We had air raids. This was in the 40s during the war. And my father let me turn the siren. There was a thing. Yeah, and I would go louder and louder and louder, and all the old people would scramble away. And I go, yay! And I made friends with the lady opposite me. There were long corridors, and there were rooms here and rooms there. And my room was opposite Mrs. Liu. Her name was Florence Liu. And I think she was a buyer, and she was younger. She was in her 80s. She was a very together lady. So the nurses did not like Mrs. Liu because she was so together. I have a thing about nurses in nursing homes. So at night, after the nurses were away on their breaks or something, we had a system where she would knock on my door 3 times. That meant Miss Bramson was gone. So then I could come out, and she would come out, we'd meet, and we'd be all ready, and we'd sneak out of the home. And I knew all the back ways, because the front ways, their door rings, but this was the back way, because I played in this home since I was a little girl. And Mrs. Lou and I would go to the local pharmacy. We didn't go to a bar. We went to a pharmacy, and we had a phosphate or some kind of a chocolate soda, and we'd walk around. And one day we were sitting in this, and it was a pharmacy, but it also served drinks. And I heard this voice, which was very familiar. And it was the voice of the nurse, Miss Bramson. And she says, "There she is." And there were policemen. She had brought policemen there looking for me and Mrs. Lou. And they took Mrs. Lou away. And the bad part, the awful part of this is, when I saw Mrs. Lou again, she couldn't talk. Her eyes were not focused anymore. She walked very unsteadily. I don't know what they did to her, but I think at that time they restrained people. They also gave them electric shock treatments. And I suspect that Mrs. Lou had gotten some shock treatments, and they made her into a living dead person, rather than Mrs. Lou and I. We had such a good time together.
Mhm.
That was very sad. Yeah.
So that's the worst side of long-term care.
Yeah.
But you've given workshops in nursing homes all over the world. And I know that you've led validation groups from Finland, Netherlands, Belgium, all over the US.
Austria. Yeah.
A lot, Austria, I mean, you name the country, she's been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you see are the pros and cons of long-term care facilities?
Well, the cons are that it's an institution. I mean, the pros, I'm sorry. I'm against it, so that's why I said con. Con each other to get, some people are con to get into a long-term care facility. They don't want to go. So their children lie to them, and say, "Oh, this is just for a little while, and you're going to come home tonight, and don't worry. And look at this nice lady, the social worker, and so on." And then the old person I find that I can't go home. She told me, my daughter told me I was coming home. This was just for today, to look around. And there I'm stuck in this home.
Yeah.
And then people yell, and then they get, when I was working, they put on these straitjacket things, these restraints. I don't think they restrain them that way anymore, but they give them medication so that they will calm down, tranquilizing medications. And that really is the end of the person. I've seen people in long-term care facilities where I worked that could walk, they could talk, that were coherent. And after a couple of weeks, they couldn't walk, they couldn't talk, and they didn't make sense anymore.
Okay, I'm going to be devil's advocate here and do the other side of the coin, because I've also worked in a lot of different facilities, and there are great ones where people, the staff try to create a home, and they've integrated aspects of validation philosophy and principles, and you can see it and you can feel it. And there have been places where one caregiver was walking down the hallway, and she happened out of the corner of her eye to see an old woman sitting humming in a chair. And the nurse stopped what she was doing, sat on the floor next to the lady, and started singing with her. And that took her 2-3 minutes, and they sang together. And she said, "All right, I'll come back later." And she stood up and went on with her work. That is incorporating the principles and techniques into everyday life, and that is also possible. So if somebody is all alone at home and they don't have the support system, then a place like that is a lifesaver. So I guess it's a matter of your life circumstances and your financial possibilities and personal choice. Because I remember forever, Ma, you used to say to me, I am never going into a nursing home.
That's right.
So, but that's colored by your entire life history. And having lived in a nursing home from the age of 4 till they built the director's house, which probably was 4 or 5 years later. So that's all.
Institutionalization. When you're an institution, I don't care how wonderful it is, you lose your individuality. You have to get up at a certain time. You have to, well, you
Not
think,
all.
well, that's been my experience. And maybe some of the staff is not so respectful.
Right.
I guess I see it from what I haven't been in a nursing home or in a long-term care facility recently. So I'm going by my experiences of what they were.
You helped change the entire field because everyone is trying to work now with what you said was, we have to step into the shoes of the older adult. And that has been translated these days into person-centered care. But you were the one who started that back in the 70s.
60s. I think
60s.
I started working in 63. I had my first group at the Montefiore home.
Wow.
1963.
I still have some of the records of that group, which I found in your basement.
I learned from my mother, from Uma. She was a social worker, trained at that time. They were very inspired by Freud. So when my mother got her graduate degree, she had to write. They called it "I said, you said," exactly what, So that's how I learned. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are gold. Let me switch gears for a moment, if that's okay. For everybody here, what would you say are the most important 3 things when approaching an older adult who has cognitive decline?
I think empathy would be.
A happy face.
Always a happy face?
Well, on an initial approach.
Understanding what they feel.
I think it depends on what you're getting from the person. So if they are not happy, it's not a good idea to try to change their mood.
Yeah.
You maybe want to ask them what's wrong and kind of go down that road with them.
Could you hear what he said?
Did I hear? Yeah, I would pick up the emotional overtones. So if I'm an old lady sitting there and I'm crying, my eyes closed, the worker would feel, because I'm so obviously miserable. The worker would feel my misery. I mean, I would feel, if I was the worker, when I was alone and I sat there and I was miserable, so I could feel like that old lady feels. And then I could say to the old lady, "You're so sad." And then probably the old lady's eyes would open, because here is someone on the outside that's come to my inside and knows how I feel. That would say, yes, I am so sad. And I, as a caregiver, I wouldn't worry, oh my God, this lady's going bananas. She's going to go off the deep end. No, it's healthy for her to express her feelings. And I've got enough ego that I can take it. I'm not going to fall apart because this old lady's crying. I'm going to center myself. And maybe the lady has something I don't like about her. Maybe she has bad breath or something, or no teeth, or whatever it is. I can center myself and relate to her on her level where she is. Because I've been where she is at some point in my life. I felt sad, I felt alone, or I felt angry, frustrated. These are common human emotions, and you don't have to be old in a nursing home to feel them.
We had talked about doing a role play, you and I.
Okay.
Might this be a good moment for it?
Yes, it would be fine with me.
Okay.
I'll be the old lady.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear, Vicki.
I'll be the carer.
Okay.
All right.
So you want me just to start with something? Our time?
Well, I'll come in and say, good morning, Mimi. How are you doing?
Hey, Mimi, how you doing? Always little Miss Mary Sunshine, aren't you? I'm doing lousy. That's how I'm doing.
What is the worst thing about right now?
People like you coming in all the time and getting into my business, nosy people. And I don't want to be in this place. This is a horrible place. I want to get out of here as soon as I can. And I called my lawyer, whatever his name is, I forgot. But at any rate, if you get a call from a lawyer, and if you find in the newspapers all the bad things that you're doing, don't be surprised. I was the one that told them. Yes, sir. I called the papers and told them what's going on in here.
So you're miserable. You don't want to be here. And you're trying to tell everybody that, but now nobody's listening.
That's right. That's right. You hit the stone on whatever you hit a stone. I forgot the
Right.
The head like this.
So if you could have one thing that was really good right now, what might that be?
My mother with me.
What was she like?
Well, she wasn't a very nice lady. Yeah, but she was a very strong woman. You know, she came to America all by herself with 2 little children. She couldn't speak English very well, and she got a job. Yeah, she became the matron in a nursing home and worked with the Jewish Refugee Service.
Wow.
Yeah, she was really something.
So thinking of your mother's strength, that helps you now.
Yes, it does.
Nice. What a great way of handling it.
You mean of being here and being alone?
Well, when you're so angry at where you're at, thinking about somebody who had great strength seems to help. At least that's what you just said.
Yeah, but I have to be careful not to yell, and because then they'll might put me away somewhere, and I don't want to be put away. I know I saw those people that are on the other side, and they have steel windows there, bars on their windows, and I do want to go where they are. Yeah.
Well, if it's okay with you and you feel that you trust me, I would love to listen to you and you can yell, and that's perfectly okay with me.
Thank you.
Okay, is that a deal?
Deal. But you don't,
Okay.
but you have to not put me away after it.
No, not my job.
Hey, I've seen that happen.
Mm,
They're yelling and or crying, and then they get put away, they get restrained. And
mm,
after that, they can't talk anymore, they can't walk anymore. I don't want that to happen to me.
no. Okay, let's close the role play.
Okay,
You got water?
yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. So, how did that feel for you?
Role playing like that?
What I did in the role play, did that feel okay to you?
It felt that you understood what I was going through and you would have liked me to talk more about it. And I think I would have felt free if I, to get angry at my situation.
Yeah.
And maybe tell you how it used to be, how people used to respect me. And I was a teacher and all that. And now it's gone.
Yeah. And that took what, 3 minutes, 4 minutes time?
Mm.
But what it took was first centering, which Naomi said, then carefully observing. I saw particularly her mouth and her eyes and her shoulders and her breathing. I can even see that on Zoom. And that gave me her emotional state. So I could pretty quickly move in and have empathy with her. And then I just chose a lot of rephrasing and rephrasing with empathy, not just repeating the words like a mimic, but sometimes just a key word is enough. Yeah, and a couple of open questions, and that was it. So, and did you want to make any comments about the role play?
To me?
Mm-hmm.
No, what were the open questions? Tell me, I forgot them.
Me too.
Well, that makes me
Oh dear.
family.
So when did you last feel that way or something like that?
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing, I just want to make a quick comment. I thought it was a masterful job of redirecting.
No,
Um,
no redirection.
No.
Never. In validation,
Well,
we don't lie and we don't redirect.
okay.
Okay, let him give the example of what he saw.
Well,
Okay.
the way, what I didn't mean that you did it on purpose necessarily, but when she started talking about her mother, then the anger and the frustration kind of went a different direction. Maybe that's what I meant.
The question I asked just before that was, what helps you when you're so angry or lost? And she came up with that answer.
What did I say?
You said, thinking of my mother.
Oh,
And then that started, right.
It's
It's got to come
right.
from them. I can't
That's
have
what I
an
meant.
agenda. Right. I
She came
know
up with it.
exactly. Exactly. So we found she was able to express the emotion, and that's important. And then at the end of that, you can see where she wants to take it. Nobody stays angry forever. Nobody cries forever. the emotion will have, it goes up, it peaks, and then it comes down. And that's just a question of energy. You know, we lose energy. It can come back up again, but if you can allow the individual, and this goes for anybody, to express and really be heard, and that's one of Naomi's first principles, you know, let them express their emotion, really hear them. And then they'll have that, and then you can do something else. But if you try to drive an agenda somewhere, right, then it won't work. And often old people will have their own coping mechanisms that help them. You used to tell a story, Mom, about a lady who would talk to her picture of her dead husband that she kept in the bread box.
That's right.
And that helped her. She would go open the bread box and talk to her husband.
And I have a friend now who does that I was in the second grade with. And she lives in Vancouver, and we still communicate. But she's able to talk to her husband. She tells me about it.
Nice.
And I talked to Ed when we went to his grave day before yesterday. The caregiver was very kind, and she moved away so that I could be private with Ed. You know, he was buried, and I could talk with him. And she knew I would be embarrassed if she was there. She was extremely thoughtful. And I felt really lucky to have someone that was so sensitive.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really glad you have that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I was able to communicate with Ed in his grave, you know. And it was good.
Ed and Naomi, well, I'll ask, tell everybody how long you were married.
Ed and I got married in 1963. So what's that, 60 some years, I guess. 67 years, is it? I don't know, but it's a long time. Yeah.
I have to sit here and do the math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ed had never been married before. He was 40 years old when we got married. And I had to ask him. That's why he never got married before, because the other girls he dated didn't ask him, because he would never ask them.
Oh, tell about how he asked you on your first date. It's such a great story. You were sitting next to him at a dinner.
Mother, who desperately wanted me to get married, because I had been married and divorced and came back to Cleveland. I'd been living in New York. And my mother, there's a word for it in the Jewish dictionary, I don't know what it is, but anyway, someone who, you know, like who was the lady like in Yentl, a matchmaker. Yeah, my mother was a matchmaker, and she wanted me to get married. So she deliberately invited Ed, because he had never married and he was 40 years old. And she invited him to show his film. He had made a film of the home. And so she invited all the board members of the home, and Ed came and showed his film, and she put Ed right next to me. And the first thing that Ed said to me was, "Do you have a bicycle? Do you ride a bicycle?" Now, I had just come from New York, and I hadn't ridden a bicycle since I was about 13 years old. And I said, "Oh, sure, I ride a bicycle. I ride it all the time." I don't know if I said that, but something to that effect. And then I asked my mother, "Do you have my bicycle? Where's my bicycle?" And my mother still had my old clunker, you know, the bike with the big tires, when I was 16 years old. And so the next day, Ed and I went out on our bicycles. He had this very sleek 12 gear or whatever, how many gears it had, Schwinn bicycle. And I had this very old clunker of a bicycle. And yeah, I did buy a new bicycle after that. So, and our dates were always on bicycles, up hills, down hills. But Ed was too cheap to take me out to dinner. Shouldn't say that because he's dead, but he won't mind. Anyway,
Funny.
we had a great time.
I'm thinking there might be questions from people in the audience. Things you might like to ask Naomi or me about the method, about her life. You can write it in the chat if you want.
One
Mario?
second, I'm getting a question here texted to me, so I'm seeing what the question is.
Wonderful. Am I correct that this is 1 hour? Or
Yeah,
am I running over time?
it doesn't matter. I think we're at an hour right now.
Almost.
I actually have a question for Naomi. My question is, what your career has really, I mean, this is kind of like your life work. What goals do you have for validation therapy? Where would you like it to be, and how would you like for it to live on?
Well, I would like anybody who works in a long-term care facility, especially, to be trained in validation.
Yeah.
The best thing is if you go to nursing school or graduate school, that you have to take a course in validation. You have to know what is validation and some of the basic techniques. That is mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
In a long-term care facility, or even in an independent housing facility, so that you can maintain the independence so the person doesn't deteriorate, so they can stay there as long as they live, you know, moving and talking and walking and having a good time. So my goal would be to just facilitate independence and fun, and wanting to be alive in your old age.
Absolutely. We spoke a little bit before beginning this webinar about just aging in general and beginning to forget certain things, and that being a common human experience. Most of us will experience that. I think what you said before was very insightful. Could you speak a bit more about that?
Say that again.
Just about forgetting certain things or having changes in memory as you age, and that being a very normal part of the human experience. Before we started the webinar, we spoke a bit about that, and I wanted to hear your insight so that we can share it with everyone.
That's a good question.
Well, it's a good example right now of when I said, what did you say? What was the question? I had forgotten. And you just asked me the question 2 seconds ago. So that's a really good example of accepting the fact that I forgot. And then I had to figure in my mind, why did you forget? Because I was thinking of other things. I don't know whether that was justifying my forgetting, but it was. My mind was wandering off in other areas. And so I forgot what you asked me. And so I think the main thing is accepting that, being able to say, I forgot what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm an old lady, and that's okay. Old ladies can forget.
That's
So,
a great answer. Thank you. We have a question also from Kelly Schneider. She would like to know, how do you approach someone who thinks he is out of town and wants to go home when actually that person is home?
okay. Where is, you would ask them, where is your home? Did your mother and father build your house? Where was your room in this house? What do you miss the most about not being in the house? Is it your own bed? I think it's accepting the fact that even though this is their home, they feel strange. I feel strange in this place. It's not my home.
Hmm.
I don't care how long I've been here and that I have to stay here for the rest of my life. I want to go back to my own home in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I live. I don't live here in Oregon. It's ridiculous. You know, those.
Mm.
That's very interesting. And so acknowledging, again, I think the theme is just acknowledging and relating and kind of talking through. So that's a very common question that we are faced with all the time. People sometimes don't know where they are, and I think that's an interesting way to deal with that. That was a great question, Kelly. Also, Joey has a question, so I will unmute him and have him ask.
Is this Jerry?
Joey.
Jerry, that's
Okay.
Jerry. Hey, Naomi, it's Jerry, Joey, AKA Joey. Actually, Diana Tucker, actually Mario's mother and the owner of the company, has the question for you.
Naomi, it's a privilege to have you. It's my honor to just be here on this webinar, and you look amazing. And I wish that I look like you when I'm 89. And my question is, what is the best way to just keep your mind sharp as yours is and just stay as well put together as you are? What has helped you through the years, and how do you do it?
I think a lot of it is in the genes. You know, I think, yeah, I hate to say that, but I really believe that I'm very fortunate that I have good genes from my mother and my father both. But also, in addition to that, is using what you got. Reading when I'm alone, not feeling, being able to express I'm alone now. My children are gone and I'm feeling awful. And if no one hears me, I can talk to myself and I can write also. I go upstairs and there's a computer and I can write just exactly how I feel. And that makes me feel so much better. And then, of course, if I have someone to talk with, to express myself, I guess that's the important thing is to, when you get old, is to be able to express your feelings to somebody who will listen to you with empathy. And if you have nobody, all I can think of is when Ed was very sick one day, or for a while, I had I blew up a figure, you know, like a Santa Claus figure. And I talked to that figure. It was rubber, and you blow it up like a balloon. And I was able to talk to the figure. And it made me feel much better. But I always knew what it was. Now, the danger of that might be if I get very old and then I forget that it's not real. It's not a living, breathing thing. I forget that it's a figure. But then I'm happy in my own world. And then the caregiver would say, hey, you're talking to, what, do you have a name for this figure? Yeah, I call him Jonathan. Oh, Jonathan, how old is Jonathan? And where'd you meet him? I met him at a dance. So he's so good looking. And I'm able to express my sexual feelings, which are there to express them. And I can use Jonathan.
Right. A lot of people use dolls, a lot of women in particular, to express their feelings of wanting to be a mother.
And sometimes if I'm my brain is really, the connections aren't there, but I have intuitive knowledge, feelings, I use part of my body to, like, I can use my hand, which feels so soft and so nice, just like my little baby. So then my hand, rock-a-bye baby, my hand becomes my baby. And I'm meeting my human needs to be a mother, to express myself. And if you relate to me that way, you know, your baby, is it a boy, is it a girl, so on, I'll feel so much better. And then at the end of our conversation, I'll say, you know, it's not really a baby. It was just my arm that I used. That happens very often.
There are many layers of consciousness.
That's very important.
Your words.
Well, Jung and Freud helped me with that. Jung symbols, you know, the hand would be a symbol. Symbol is something that substitutes for something else that has a lot of emotional meaning. And so a lot of what I say, I didn't make up myself, you know, it comes from, I think, Jung and Erickson.
Maslow.
Well, and basically Freud, I think. You know, deviations from Freud, but was my background. That's what I learned in school.
Well, and Erickson was a big influencer for you.
True.
Erik Erikson.
And that's helped me understand the resolution struggle. The people at the end of life have to justify having lived. So they're acting out the stuff that they've shoved inside, that they've denied or controlled all their life. So now at the end of life, it's got to come out so that I can die without all this pain. The idea is that feelings that are expressed to someone who listens with empathy are relieved.
Wow. Well, I thank you again very much for your time today, for accepting our invitation to speak, and for your insight. We definitely would like to continue this relationship. So I really look forward to that.
Great.
Thank you.
And I
The opportunity. It's okay, Vicki. You can interrupt me. I'm your mom.
I just wanted to say, I put 2 links in the chat that link to different ways of learning validation. We also have a YouTube channel where we've got tons of videos, how to center, how to observe, the basics that we talked about today. And you can use those. I mean, they're free. You can run them again. You can use it as a mini training. We also have the what do you do when, and you get a lot of my mom in role plays to help you cope with challenging circumstances. And we hope you will, we will see you all in the future.
Likewise. Thank you again so much.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Vicky and Naomi.
What an honor.
Thank you for the opportunity, really, to express myself, which is very important now. It's a way of preparing for death in a way I see it, because I'm now almost 90 years old. So I need to prepare to die, and expressing the stuff I've is a step towards, I think, preparing for death.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing, you know.
You can always call me Jerry.
That's the name of the book. You can always call me Jerry. How's that?
Thank you for the invitation and for spending the hour time with us.
Absolutely. It was our pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
It was our pleasure. Thank you.
You got a thumb.